Lovely, lovely people, how the heck are you? I hope your week is going swimmingly and you're settled in, ready for another dose of self-improvement that won't make you feel shit about yourself because it actually works. Yes, you will only find solutions. I will never set you up to fail. That is my promise. You're on That's Helpful with me, Ed Stott. Now, do you identify as a people pleaser? So many of us do, and you might think it's because you're too kind. But I've got news for you. Saying yes to everyone is actually damaging your relationships and your self-esteem. Today, we're going to get to the core of your people-pleasing tendencies and learn some simple shifts that are going to give you the confidence to make the changes you so badly need to revolutionize your relationships and give you your energy back in the process. Dr. Vicki and Dr. Ritz are counselling psychologists from the Therapy for podcast, and I am so excited to have them here. Really excited to have you here. Thank you guys so much for joining me.
Thanks for having us, Ed. It's great to be here.
Very exciting. So, I don't know which one of you is best placed to answer this, but Dr. Ritz, I feel like you might have a little people-pleasing tendencies considering what you told me before we started, right?
It's an interesting one because I think it comes back to your intention. Why are you doing something? And so, for example, I set this up, or we set this up together. Yeah. And Dr. Vicki and I, we were really keen to really spread awareness about people pleasing. It comes up on our podcast quite often as a dilemma. And, so we reached out to you, you come back to us, we're like, yeah, we're doing it. We get the date booked in, and it's like the day after I've moved house. And this is moving a house that I've got 7 years worth of stuff in. And let's like set the scene as well. We're in the UK, you're in Australia. So rather than being like, I don't know, Ritz, is this a good idea? I was like, yeah, let's go for it. I could do it all. So I'm trying to people please myself. I'm trying to people please Vicki. I'm trying to probably impress you as well, Ed. And yeah, the alarm went off and I hit snooze. And then I when you wake up and you're like, and you know.
I mean, I feel like your story there, Ritz, just shared why people pleasing might be impacting our relationships. But how might we see this playing out in our lives? If we think, I don't know, am I a people pleaser? Am I not? What might we see happening in our relationships if we are tending towards people pleasing?
Okay, because I'm also a recovering people pleaser, so recovering, I still slip into it every now and again. I think in relationships, it can be really easy to slip into resentment when we realize that, oh my goodness, I'm constantly saying yes. I'm constantly bending over backwards. I'm constantly trying to prioritize what everyone else wants, and I'm not really listening to myself. And that the resentment is really aimed in the wrong direction, really, because how are other people to know what our needs are, what our boundaries are, if we don't actually share them? And really the resentment, we should kind of aim it towards ourselves, although I don't encourage anyone to resent themselves. But really the buck stops with us. And we need to take a deeper look at, why am I doing this? Why am I putting my needs last in order to placate everyone else around me? The only person that I need to look at and to address, and the only person that can address this, is myself.
And do you think, because there's some people, aren't there, who it's harder to clock in ourselves like anything, isn't it? But there's some people that we'll all know somebody like this, who almost wears it as a badge of honor. Like they're the person who does the most for everyone. Nobody could do what they do. They have it harder than everyone else because they have to do so many things for so many different people. There is like an identity thing in this sometimes for people who think like they're the only person who can do this much, right?
Yeah. I mean, I tend to see it in my clinic where it becomes most inevitable is if somebody as a child was parentified, so they often had to, grow up much earlier before their years and take care of others. And then they received attention and love for taking care of others. Like that was very much acknowledged rather than just like, I adore you and love you for being a child. So they then grew up understanding that's my currency of love. That's my currency of worth. That's who I am in life. If I take care of somebody else, I'll be acknowledged. The world will see me. I'll get attention. And that's how I keep moving forward and moving forward and moving forward. And so that's what, Vicki was saying. As you get older and you start to realize, wait, hang on a second. I'm the one doing this. I also think I'm the only one who can do it the way that it's supposed to be done. But then I'm resenting everybody because nobody else is stepping up. Nobody else can do it like I can. And it tends to form then part of people's self-esteem.
And their identity as well. Like they really step into that role. And so then for it to be taken away from them feels really destabilizing, because who am I if I'm not the caretaker? Who am I if I'm not the one who always gets it right? And can I be accepted just for me?
Do I accept me just for me?
Yeah. So it's quite deep rooted, actually.
I was coming into this being like, this will be helpful for my listeners, but I won't get anything out of this. And you just completely rug pulled me. So thanks, ladies. That's great. I'm like, the cogs are turning. If you're watching this, the podcast is now on YouTube, but if you're watching this, you can see the scales falling from my eyes. So how might we see this playing out? There's the kind of whole resentment piece. If we're feeling like, nobody's stepping up, I'm having to do all of this, we probably see that in our relationships. But how else might we see this playing out in our relationships if we are people pleasers? Like, what are the symptoms that we'll see in our lives?
I'd say we'd find that we are probably always busy and preoccupied with people in our lives, really preoccupied with what everyone else is doing. Kind of like Ritz was saying, kind of stepping in and taking over situations, thinking I'm the only one that can really do this right. We'll see that people will actually lean on us quite heavily. And so we will be the go-to person that people, they come to when they need something, when they need a listening ear, when they need a favor. We're the go-to person. And it's kind of like not even questionable. It's just, oh yeah, Vicki can do it. Or yeah, she'll be okay with that. It's just kind of like a given. And I think we'll find that for the individual themselves, they would feel quite a lot of dis-ease within their body and quite a lot of inner turmoil. So even the thought of saying no, it may come up in their mind. They may think, oh, actually, this probably isn't ideal for me right now. But that unease, that dis-ease that they feel within themselves can feel really palpable and really strong. And so they'll want to get rid of that disease by just saying, okay, I just got to find a way to make it happen. So I think like those are the ways that it can kind of really manifest within the individual and within the relationships around them. They're usually the go-to person.
And it doesn't have to be huge things that you're doing for people, right? Like I was listening to your podcast with the woman who wrote in, and a bloke on the train, she like got this magazine and she was really excited about reading the magazine on the way home, and a bloke on the train came up to her and said, "Oh, are you finished with that? Can I read it?" And she was like, "Okay, you can read it." And she sat next to him and he read this magazine and then proceeded to take it off the train. And she was like, "Oh, okay, so you've now just taken the magazine that I was really excited about." But then started like a self-reflection in her, like, why did I do that? I was really excited about reading the magazine. Like, no, you can't have it. So it doesn't have to be big things that we're doing for people, right? It can be things where we do them and then think, what? Why did I do that? That's so strange, when I was like really excited about that thing and I just let somebody take it away from me. It doesn't have to be huge things, right?
No, and I think I don't actually think the think is the big deal. As you said, it doesn't have to be a big thing. It can be a small thing. But I think saying no to a big thing or a small thing can feel the same to people. And so that's the really important part, is the saying no, because in that situation, what did saying no mean about her as a person? And it comes back to, I'm not good enough, I'm unlovable. And as Vicki was saying, I think people do have thoughts, I'm going to say no. I think sometimes people even try it and do say no. And then what happens is, especially if it's no to another grown-up, the repercussions start. And the ripples start to form. And this is something that I tend to call leaky boundaries. It's like, right, I'm going to put my boundary down. But then because the impact I got back from that wasn't favorable, that means I must have done a bad thing. So let my boundary come back up. And so then it's quite leaky. You're giving quite a mixed message. And what's happening there is that physiological response that Vicki was talking about. I think people often don't realize the difference between guilt and shame. So guilt is such a super healthy, normal emotion to have. It means you're a human being. It means you have morals. It means that you're trying to make sense of the world between right and wrong. You know, you're not a sociopath. So well done. You know, great job. And shame is more behavioral based. So because we've been probably conditioned to believe that because you're feeling guilty, that means you're doing something wrong. So don't do it. We then use shame to bring back what we want to do. So if I really maybe pad this out for you, I once worked with a client who, as part of, their work, they were allowed to finish their day, I think it was in the afternoon, to go and do something for themselves. So this person thought, oh, I really want to pick my children up from school. I never really get the chance to do that. That's something I want to do. So we made a plan for it, how that could work. And when I met up with them the following week and I asked, how did it go? The narrative was very much like, I got everything done. I, delegated things, and I told myself, I don't need to do that for tomorrow. I made my to-do list for tomorrow. And then as I started to unpack everything, or pack everything up rather, I looked around the office and people were ferociously typing away or on the phone. And I thought, how can I leave now when everyone's working so hard? So they opened back up their laptop, called their partner and said, I can't pick up the kids. Please, can you do it? And so when we unpacked what that was, I was like, oh, that's so interesting. You felt guilty for leaving, but you weren't able to tolerate the guilt, which was then able to help you take that helicopter view and think, oh, so-and-so went and played tennis the other day. They took that afternoon to do that. Someone went and did a floristry course, whatever it might be. But you felt so shameful, you felt so guilty, then you shamed yourself and sat back down and stopped yourself doing something that was really important to you.
That's wild, isn't it? Especially when it's something that we would feel would be such a driver, right? Like going to pick your kids up from school, the shame stops you from doing that. That is a powerful emotion. So then if we are in these relationships and we feel like we're people pleasing, then what is the difference between healthy compromise when we're in a normal relationship and we do things for other people and, it's give and take, and self-sacrifice? How do we know if what we're doing is problematic or it's just part of a normal relationship where, oh, you do this, I do this, and, it's give and take?
That's a really good one. And I think the key to that is knowing or asking yourself, if I don't do this, what will happen? So if you believe that the outcome of you compromise or not compromising is that, I'm going to be rejected, I'm going to be socially isolated, I'm no longer going to be accepted, and you keep spiraling and you get to the worst case scenario, which is this relationship will disintegrate. If that's your motivation for doing it, then would say that is people pleasing.
Wow.
Or, your worry is, what will people think about me? How will they view me? Will they view me as someone who is, still capable, someone who's worthy of love and respect or not? So I think asking yourself, if I don't do this, what will happen? If you feel that actually, if I don't compromise, if I don't say yes in this situation, maybe it'll be a little bit awkward. Maybe, they'll be a bit disappointed with me, but the relationship will survive. Then that's okay. You've got the green light there. But yes, I think really looking at what is your fear here? Is there a fear? And if the fear is actually, I'm going to be rejected, then that's a telltale sign that you're engaging in people pleasing.
So interesting. So, I think so many of us say like people pleasing, or I'm a people pleaser, or in like a flippant way, but actually it's so deep rooted. I have never actually considered where this behavior comes from before, because it's also sometimes worn as a bit of a badge of honor, like, right, like people say, oh, I'm a people pleaser, with the implication that, oh, I'm such a kind person, you know, I'm so empathetic, when
But
actually it's quite deep rooted. Yeah. So tell me why it's not kind.
Yeah. It's not kind. It's an act of self-sabotage. Actually, it's also not self-sabotage. It's an act of self-preservation. Because when we were younger, if you were someone that regularly needed to engage in people-pleasing, it's because, you know, when we think of children are vulnerable. They require so much in order to survive. They need love. They need attention. They need care. And, you know, as Ritz was alluding to earlier, children are very clever in thinking of how to get that. If they're not receiving it in a very open way, they will figure out what they need to do in order to feel accepted. We're super clever as a human species, right? And so people pleasing as a child is actually a form of survival. This is what I can do to gain love and to gain acceptance, because without it, you know, we really struggle. We really struggle to survive. And so if we want to be really brutal about it or harsh about it, we could even say that it is a kind of form of manipulation. Not with a negative intent. It's not with the intent to get one over on someone, to abuse our trust with someone, but literally it's about to survive. It's about survival. Like, I really want to survive here. And so that's why we say people pleasing isn't actually about being kind. It's about self-preservation.
I think it's, you know, just Vicki, as you were talking, I was like, my words that were coming into my mind, and especially because, as you know, we were talking, I've got a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, and I'm so in the trenches, and I hear other people saying to me, oh, your kids are just manipulating you. They're just manipulating you.
Yeah,
and,
I hear that.
You know,
people say that to me.
Yeah, do you hear that a lot as well? And, you know, it's, and I'm like having to challenge that status quo of, no, they're not. Like, they are just wired for love. Like, kids are just wired for love. They're not trying to manipulate me. I need to look behind the behavior of what they're doing right now and what they're trying to communicate to me, which is probably, I need love and attention.
Yeah, I think this is a whole other rabbit hole that we won't go down with now, but people are obsessed with making kids independent, even babies. And it's like, they're a baby. You know, like, I get criticized for picking my baby up too much, carrying her too much, going to her cries too quickly. It's like, damn, you know, it's that constant shifting of the goalposts for mums. But anyway, that's a whole other rabbit hole, which I could rant on
we'll come
about
back to that one
for a long time. Yeah, maybe that's another episode. I like it. So we do have a framework for this, which you guys have come up with, that's incredibly helpful and is going to be a game changer if this is something that you are struggling with. Tell me about the authenticity over approval framework. I love this.
Yeah, so it's a 3-step model, and it's really about helping you to build more meaningful connections. So the first step is about recognizing and rewiring. Then it's about how do you know what your boundaries are? And then finally, how do you set them by communicating authentically? So Dr. Vicki and I can kind of talk you through them. But that first step is about, how do you begin to spot that you have a people-pleasing pattern and then really shift your mindset from my validation is so external to something more internal, and to starting to develop your own sense of self-love and self-worth and what you need to give to yourself. So if you feel like, as Vicki was saying, this relationship will not survive unless I continue to play this role, it's about challenging that dynamic. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But am I ready to challenge it? Am I ready to take that risk in order to start putting myself first? So that's the recognize, and that's the rewiring part. Because the neuroscience behind it is, our brains are plastic. There's something called neuroplasticity. We have these neurons in our brain that we're able to rewire. But because you have been walking this mud path for so long, you're entrenched in it, But we want to show you, hey, guess what? There's this other path. There's this path called path B or path C or path D, and you have the ability to walk down it. But you have to keep doing it. You have to keep doing it to entrench it. So it's really important to not have those leaky boundaries and have those firm boundaries that, Vicki will come on to. But I'd start to ask yourself this question, do I say yes when actually I really mean no? And every time I'm saying yes, I'm actually probably saying no to myself. So I think that's a really good tagline that people can hold on to. And then when I think somebody's going to be disappointed in me, is that making me feel anxious? And so then do I prioritize people's own needs over what my needs are? So that's that first part of recognizing, building that self-awareness, and then starting to rewire your brain.
I love it. So you can check yourself when you're having those thoughts, right? Oh, interesting. Because I think that's part of the problem, isn't it? Kind of clocking that this is what you're doing is quite hard.
Yeah, and even if you don't do it in the moment, I always say go back and do a post-mortem, because usually the intrusive thoughts, they tend to come in when you're not busy. So when it's all quietened down, that's when the thoughts will start to kick in, why did you say yes to that? You didn't want to. Like the gal did on the train.
Yeah.
Gal on the train.
Yeah. Oh my God. And then the second part, once we've kind of clocked that this is what we're doing, what do we do then?
So we need to identify and understand what our own boundaries are. And first of all, realize that boundaries aren't a dirty word. Boundaries are really helpful and healthy, and our boundaries will differ from person to person. So really take some time to think about, what are my boundaries? What makes me feel good about this relationship, about this situation, about the dynamics that I regularly engage in, and what doesn't make me feel so good. What doesn't make me feel good is when I say yes to helping somebody else when I know that it's really going to impact me in such and such area. What I do find helpful is when I can say yes and I can authentically kind of give my whole yes, knowing that this is something that I'm going to enjoy doing. This is something that I know is going to enhance our relationship. And I know there are no negative consequences if I say no. So just really tapping into yourself, and you can do this through journaling, you can do this through having a conversation with a friend, just kind of going through your relationship history and saying, okay, what is the dynamic that I have with this individual, and what do I need to put in place in order to enhance this relationship rather than take away from it, So really taking some time to know what your own individual boundaries are, because they really differ from person to person.
Yeah. Do you think sometimes, if you are somebody who just automatically says, yep, do you think trying to shift your default to something a little less committal, let me check my calendar, or I might be able to do that, can I come back to you, or something that gives you more time to think about it? Because I'm always I say yes to everything and then sometimes have to backtrack, and that makes me feel really shit, right? So to try and make your default be can I get back to you? Is that something that would be helpful in these situations?
That's a great technique to use. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. Oh, do you know what? I really would like to do that. Let me just double check and see if I can.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually found that way easier to say it now I have a baby, because everyone's I get it.
Yeah. You got a good excuse.
But I also think, I also want to encourage, if you said yes and you actually felt no, and you didn't you weren't confident in that moment to say it, and then you've given yourself that little pep talk and you're no, I'm going to go back, I want to say no. Do it. You can absolutely as well go back and go, I'm so thankful that you thought of me to do or ask or whatever it might be. And I know I said yes in the moment because I really want to help. But actually, now I've had to think about it, I don't think I can. Or I don't think I'm able to. Just be honest about it and your words haven't, and I think people then are going to start to feel, oh, I'm going to be that, person who's just lazy, or I let people down at the last minute. And then again, just fact check yourself. Are you the person that does that? Or is it okay from time to time to say, I actually said yes, but I've had to think about it. I have checked my diary now, and actually I can't.
And that actually enhances relationships if you do it that way, because relationships really thrive when there is honesty, when there's vulnerability and, transparency. So being open and saying, oh, yeah, I really did want to help you, but I realize I can't. The other person is going to find it very hard to hold on to any kind of bitterness or resentment, knowing that you were tussling with what you wanted to do versus what you needed to do. And it also gives permission also for other people to be authentic too, and for them to really take a look and say inwards and say, actually, does this work for me or not? You give other people permission to do so when you start.
It's great role modeling, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, really great. And so if we've kind of clocked that this is what we're doing, we're starting to realize our boundaries, and we're starting to stick by them, not have those leaky boundaries. What's number 3? What's the last part of this little framework?
So communicating your needs authentically and assertively. So I like to talk about, or communicating your boundaries rather. So I like to talk about boundaries being gates, a fence that we kind of come to. And a gate can open, it can close, we're in control of that gate opening or closing. But we want to communicate our needs or our boundaries in a way that doesn't shock the other person. It's not like they come into contact with an electric fence and then they literally have to jump back. It hurts them. We want to be able to communicate our needs in a assertive but a compassionate way. And so how we can do that is not by shouting, it's not by being disrespectful, it's not by saying, oh my gosh, you always do this, don't you know what I'm going through? Which can often happen if we're one way for so long, and then suddenly we're kind of engaging our boundaries, and we can kind of flip to the other extreme and be quite rude with them and quite firm.
Yeah, because we're trying to figure out how to do it, right?
Yeah, it's an art, it's a balance. And so we like to encourage people to use I statements and to take ownership of, as Ritz was saying in her example, I really want to do this, or I thought I could, but I've realized that I actually need to do X, Y, and Z, or I just don't have the time or the headspace to do it. And so just really own what you need and how you feel about it, rather than trying to blame the other person or make assumptions about why they're asking you to do something or what their intentions are. Like, oh, you always do this to me, you don't understand, or, you wouldn't know how I feel. Just keep with the I.
Yeah,
I would
like
love
that
to, but I can't.
That's super helpful. And do you think that we have to be prepared that if we have been into people-pleasing tendencies and we start to put in place some firm boundaries that protect our energy, do we think we have to be okay with losing some of those relationships?
Yeah, unfortunately, because as we'd love to think that everyone is okay with us having boundaries and prioritizing our own needs. Unfortunately, there are some people who benefit from us, maintaining a particular role. And so we have to be able to tolerate the discomfort of saying no, and other people having a response to that, being disappointed. It's okay to disappoint people.
Yeah, I think when you think about relationships, like one of the most important parts of them is it's something called rupture and repair that we talk about in therapy. So recognizing like your relationships aren't meant to be perfect. So when you have these moments where someone's like, you've really let me down, I thought you were going to do this for me and you've really let me down, that it's, you can say something like, I hear that I have really let you down, and I'm sorry that you feel this way and that you maybe are quite angry and frustrated and you don't know what to do. And then that opens up communication, it opens up mutual respect, it opens up the ability to work through it together and repair it. Doesn't mean that your boundaries go down, it means that you can repair through that. Because I think sometimes people think that in order to repair and to fix, you then have to make it work.
Yeah.
Rather than actually just holding on and just listening, like hearing out each other. And so if you can recognize that as part of putting boundaries down, ruptures are going to happen. And if the other person is open to repairing with you, that's probably, a good relationship. That's probably a good friendship. But if actually what you're going to just keep being met with is like barrage of, how unhappy this person is, and they're just not willing to see your point of view at all, I think that's going to give you a lot of information of, is this somebody that you want to keep in your life?
Absolutely.
Keep coming back to your needs.
Yeah, so useful. I find that 3-part framework so useful. I could talk to you guys about this all day, but we've run out of time. Thank you both so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so for
much
having
for having us.
Amazing. I want to put the link in the show notes, and I will also put the link to the Therapy Floor podcast. That's a tongue twister, ladies. Therapy Floor podcast, where Dr. Vicki and Dr. Ritz dish out their excellent advice every week. Make sure you check that out in the show notes. I'm Ed Stott. I sincerely hope that's helpful. If you've been listening and you've been enjoying it so far, please leave me a review wherever you are. I love reading them. So write down what you're thinking, and on Spotify now you can leave me a little blow, which is fun. I've been loving those. Thank you to the people who've left them. So make sure you do that. I'm Ed Stott. I will catch you again next week. Thank you so much for being in our little self-improvement club. I hope that's helpful.